I'm Haley Mitchell, 27 years old, and I've always been the family outcast. Growing up, my cousin Mackenzie and I were inseparable until we weren't. Last spring, I discovered everyone in my family received invitations to her wedding except me. When I confronted my mother, her words cut deeper than any knife could. "Mackenzie doesn't want you there," she said coldly. "Your appearance would ruin her day." That moment crystallized a lifetime of being the black sheep, the one who never quite fit the family mold. Before I dive into how this wedding drama unfolded, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt like the unwanted family member. I should start by telling you a bit more about myself. I'm a graphic designer living in Seattle, with violet-streaked hair and several meaningful tattoos that tell my life story, including a compass on my wrist that reminds me to follow my own path. My apartment walls are covered with artwork, both my own creations and pieces from local artists I admire. It's small, but it's vibrant and colorful, completely different from the pristine suburban home where I grew up. My parents divorced when I was 12, a messy separation that left emotional scars on everyone involved. My father, Gregory, remarried a few years later and moved to Chicago. We maintain a cordial relationship, but he's always been conflict avoidant, preferring to stay on the sidelines rather than stand up for me when tensions arise with my mother. My mother, Meredith, is a successful real estate agent who lives for appearances. Her Instagram feed is a carefully curated collection of spotless interiors, perfectly plated meals, and family photos where everyone looks immaculate except I'm rarely included. Ever since I was a teenager, my mother and I have had a strained relationship. She wanted a daughter who would follow in her footsteps, poised, conventional, and socially ambitious. Instead, she got me, creative, outspoken, and determined to forge my own identity. Then there's my cousin Mackenzie, my mother's sister Diane's daughter. Mackenzie and I were born just 3 months apart, and throughout our childhood we were as close as sisters. We spent every summer together at our grandparents' lake house, whispering secrets after bedtime and creating elaborate fantasy worlds in the nearby woods. Those summers were magical, building forts, swimming until our fingers pruned, and making pinky promises that would always be best friends. But as we entered our teen years, things began to change. Mackenzie embraced the path that our family had laid out for her. She joined the cheerleading squad, dated the quarterback, and became the student council president. Meanwhile, I was discovering photography, dyeing my hair with Kool-Aid, and questioning everything about the upper-middle-class suburban values our family held dear. By the time we reached college, the divide had widened considerably. Mackenzie attended our mother's alma mater to study marketing, joined the same sorority, and embedded herself deeply in the social circles our family had cultivated for generations. I chose an art school across the country, immersed myself in a diverse community of creative thinkers, and began to develop my own voice as an artist. Despite our different paths, I always made efforts to stay connected with Mackenzie. I'd send her birthday packages filled with personalized artwork. I'd make time to see her when I visited home for holidays. I genuinely celebrated her accomplishments and tried to maintain the bond we once shared. But with each passing year, our conversations became more superficial, our common ground shrinking to mere pleasantries and family gossip. 3 years ago, Mackenzie met James Henderson, the son of a prominent local family with the right connections and an impressive job at a financial consulting firm. James is handsome, polite, and completely conventional, exactly the type of man our mothers had always envisioned for her. From the moment they started dating, it was clear that everyone in the family viewed this as the perfect match. Family gatherings became increasingly uncomfortable for me. I'd arrived to subtle looks of disapproval at my latest hair color or clothing choices. My mother would pull me aside to whisper that I should try to look more professional or ask when I was going to grow out of this phase. Every achievement in my career, like when my design work was featured in a national magazine, was minimized as cute or interesting, while Mackenzie's promotion to marketing manager was celebrated with champagne toasts. I remember one particular Thanksgiving, 3 years ago, when I arrived wearing a vintage dress I'd found at a thrift store. I was proud of the find and had paired it with boots and a handmade necklace from an artist friend. Before I could even set down my contribution to dinner, a homemade cranberry sauce, my mother pulled me into the kitchen. "Couldn't you have worn something more appropriate?" she hissed. "The Hendersons are here, and you look like you just walked out of a second-hand shop." "I did," I replied, "and it's a beautiful dress that cost a fraction of what you spent on yours." Her face tightened. "This is why you're still single, Helly. No man wants a woman who doesn't take pride in her appearance." I bit my tongue, knowing that explaining my views on consumerism and authentic self-expression would fall on deaf ears. This was just one of countless similar interactions that reinforced my position as the family disappointment. When I graduated with honors from art school, my mother attended the ceremony but spent most of the time pointing out other graduates whose attire she deemed more professional and job-ready. When I landed my first position at a boutique design agency, she asked when I was going to get a real job with actual benefits. When I moved into my current apartment, which I love for its character and proximity to Seattle's vibrant art scene, she couldn't hide her dismay at the building's age and the neighborhood's diversity. Despite all this, I continued to hope that my relationship with Mackenzie might somehow transcend these tensions. I cherished our occasional coffee dates when she visited Seattle for business, clinging to fragments of the connection we once shared. But even those meetings had become performances, with Mackenzie clearly uncomfortable when acquaintances of mine with colorful hair or visible tattoos would stop by our table to say hello. I tried to build bridges, I really did, but with each attempt, it became clearer that the gap between us wasn't just about lifestyle choices, it was about fundamental values and the courage to live authentically rather than according to others' expectations. Last Christmas, our extended family gathered at my Aunt Diane's house for the annual holiday dinner. I arrived early to help set up, wearing a simple black dress in an effort to avoid any wardrobe comments from my mother. The house was decorated immaculately, a professionally designed Christmas tree, coordinated ornaments, and matching table settings that looked straight out of a magazine spread. Halfway through dinner, James stood up and tapped his glass with a spoon. The table fell silent as he reached for Mackenzie's hand. "I have an announcement to make," he said, his voice steady and confident. "Last weekend I asked Mackenzie to marry me and she said yes." The table erupted in excited squeals and congratulations. Mackenzie extended her hand to display a sizable diamond ring that caught the light from every angle. Despite our differences, my first reaction was genuine happiness for her. I remembered how she'd talked about her dream wedding even when we were building sandcastles as kids. "Congratulations, Mac," I said, using my childhood nickname for her. I made my way around the table to give her a hug. "I'm really happy for you." For a brief moment, when she hugged me back, I felt a flicker of our old connection. "Thanks, Hales," she whispered. In the following weeks, wedding talk dominated every family conversation. Aunt Diane created a group text for all the female relatives to discuss venues, flowers, and dresses. To my surprise, I was included in this chat. Mackenzie even reached out to ask my opinion on invitation designs, given my background in graphic design. "What do you think of these two options?" she texted one evening, sending photos of two elegant but rather traditional invitation samples. I took time to give her thoughtful feedback, suggesting ways the designs could be personalized to reflect her and James as a couple, while still maintaining the classic aesthetic she clearly preferred. She seemed to appreciate my input, responding with genuine thanks. A week later, she called me directly, something that had become increasingly rare. "Haley, I was thinking, would you be willing to help with some of the graphic elements for the wedding, maybe design the programs or the menu cards? I'd pay you, of course." I was touched by the request and immediately agreed, waving off her offer of payment. "Consider it my wedding gift," I said. "Just send me the details of what you have in mind and I'll work up some concepts." For the first time in years, I felt a genuine reconnection with my cousin. I spent hours developing design options for her, creating mockbus that honored her traditional taste, while incorporating subtle artistic elements that would make her wedding stationery unique. I was excited to contribute my talents to her special day, and hoped this collaboration might be a turning point in our relationship. In February, I received an invitation to Mackenzie's bridal shower. The invitation was one of the designs I'd consulted on, which made me smile. The event was scheduled for March at an upscale restaurant in our hometown. I immediately requested time off work and booked a flight, determined to fully participate in this pre-wedding celebration. The bridal shower was hosted by my Aunt Diane and my mother, with about 30 women in attendance, mostly family members, sorority sisters, and colleagues of Mackenzie's. I wore a floral dress that I thought struck a good balance between my personal style and the formality of the occasion. I'd even temporarily dyed my hair a more subtle shade of lavender instead of my usual vivid violet, hoping to avoid unnecessary tension. When I arrived, my Aunt Diane greeted me with an air kiss and a once-over that lingered on my hair. "Old Haley, you look interesting as always," she said before quickly turning to welcome another guest. Throughout the afternoon, I did my best to participate enthusiastically in all the traditional bridal shower activities, the gift opening, the advice cards, the wedding dress-themed games. I genuinely wanted to celebrate Mackenzie and show support for this important time in her life. I'd spent weeks creating a custom illustration of Mackenzie and James based on a photo from their engagement announcement, framing it beautifully as my gift. When she opened it, there seemed to be a moment of real appreciation in her eyes. "This is really special, Haley. Thank you," she said, and for a second I thought I glimpsed the cousin I'd grown up with. But as the event continued, I couldn't help noticing the whispered conversations that stopped when I approached, or how I was conspicuously left out of certain discussions about wedding details. At one point, I overheard my mother and Aunt Diane talking in hushed tones near the restroom. "I just don't think it's appropriate," my aunt was saying. "The Henderson family is very traditional." Then James's mother specifically asked about the wedding party. "I know," my mother replied. "We'll talk to Mackenzie, she'll understand it's for the best." They fell silent when they noticed me, exchanging meaningful glances before moving back to the party. I tried to convince myself they weren't talking about me, but deep down I knew better. As the weeks passed, I noticed the wedding discussions in the family group chat became vague and eventually excluded specific details about the ceremony and reception. When I directly asked about the programs I was supposed to be designing, Mackenzie responded with increasingly delayed and non-committal messages. "Oh, James's mother found someone through their country club," she eventually texted, "but thanks for offering." Still, I remained hopeful. I continued to work on a wedding gift for them, saving up to contribute to their honeymoon fund despite my limited budget as a designer at a small agency. I browsed department stores for an appropriate outfit to wear, wanting to respect the formality of the occasion while still feeling like myself. April arrived and I realized I still hadn't received an official invitation. Though I'd heard other family members discussing their serve-up responses, I told myself it was probably an oversight. Perhaps my invitation had been sent to my old address or lost in the mail. I decided to wait one more week before bringing it up directly. On a rainy Tuesday evening in late April, I was scrolling through Instagram when I came across a post from my cousin Ryan, Mackenzie's younger brother. It was a photo of his official wedding invitation with the caption, "Can't wait to see my big sis tie the knot in June." My stomach dropped. The wedding was just 6 weeks away, and I still hadn't received an invitation. This couldn't be an oversight anymore. With shaking hands, I texted Mackenzie directly. "Hey Max, saw Ryan's post about the wedding invitations. Just checking if mine might have gotten lost in the mail." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, her response came through. "I've been meaning to talk to you about that. Maybe call me tomorrow?" But I couldn't wait until tomorrow. I needed to know now. Instead of calling Mackenzie, I called my mother, figuring she would have the most direct information. "Mom, I haven't received an invitation to Mackenzie's wedding. Do you know anything about that?" There was a long pause before she answered, her voice taking on that clipped tone she used when delivering uncomfortable truths. "Haley, I thought this was clear from the bridal shower. Mackenzie and Aunt Diane decided it would be best if you didn't attend the ceremony or reception." "What? Why wouldn't I be invited to my own cousin's wedding? We grew up together." My voice rose with disbelief. "Don't be dramatic, Haley. You know why. The Hendersons are a very prominent family. This wedding is important for connections and appearances." "What does that have to do with me?" I demanded, though I already knew the answer. My mother sighed, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "Your hair, your tattoos, your whole alternative lifestyle. Mackenzie doesn't want you there. Your appearance would ruin her day. The wedding photos are going to be in the local society pages. Can't you understand that?" Each word felt like a physical blow. I'd been excluded from my cousin's wedding, a cousin I'd grown up with, shared secrets with, loved like a sister, because of how I looked, because I might ruin their perfect photos with my violet hair and visible tattoos. "Did Mackenzie actually say this?" I asked, desperately hoping this was my mother's interpretation rather than my cousin's words. "It was a joint decision. Diane and I discussed it with Mackenzie and James. They agreed it would be for the best." I hung up without saying goodbye, tears streaming down my face. My phone immediately lit up with a text from Mackenzie. "I'm really sorry, Haley. I hope you understand this is a really important day for James and me. His family has certain expectations, and I need to respect that. Maybe we can celebrate together after the honeymoon." This weak explanation only made the pain worse. I tried calling her, but the call went straight to voicemail. I left a message, my voice breaking as I spoke. "Mac, we've known each other our entire lives. I understand wanting a certain aesthetic for your wedding, but this isn't about photos. This is about family. Please call me back so we can talk about this." She never called back. Instead, I received another text the next morning. "I'm really busy with wedding preparations right now. I think it's best if we give each other some space. I hope you can respect my decision." I spent that day in a daze, unable to focus on work. By evening, my shock had transformed into deep hurt and anger. I called my best friend, Brooke, who came over immediately with a bottle of wine and a listening ear. "They did what?" she exclaimed when I explained what happened. "That's beyond messed up, Haley. I can't believe your own family would exclude you over something so superficial." "Apparently, I'd ruined the perfect society wedding photos," I said bitterly, pouring myself another glass of wine. "God forbid the family freak show up and embarrass everyone with her self-expression." Brooke's outrage on my behalf was validating, but it couldn't erase the deep wound of rejection. As we talked into the night, I found myself recounting other exclusions and rejections I'd experienced within my family over the years. The time my mother made me change clothes before a family photo session because my outfit didn't coordinate with everyone else's. The family vacation I wasn't invited to because I probably wouldn't enjoy the country club atmosphere. The way my accomplishments were minimized while Mackenzie's were celebrated. This wedding exclusion wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of a lifetime of being treated as the family embarrassment, and what hurt most was that Mackenzie, who had once been my closest ally, had fully embraced this rejection of who I was. The next day I decided to try one more avenue. I called my father, hoping he might intercede on my behalf or at least offer some comfort. His response was disappointingly predictable. "I'm sorry, kiddo. You know how your mother and Aunt Diane get about these things. Maybe you could, I don't know, temporarily change your hair color, just for the wedding?" "That's your solution, Dad. I should change my appearance because they're shallow enough to exclude me over purple hair." I couldn't keep the hurt from my voice. "I'm just trying to find a compromise here," he said weakly. "Maybe this isn't the hill to die on." "It's not about the hill, Dad. It's about the principle. They're excluding me because of how I look, not because of who I am." I know, he sighed. "Look, I'll talk to your mother again, but you know how she gets once her mind is made up." I knew he wouldn't follow through. He never did when it came to standing up to my mother or Aunt Diane. After hanging up, I felt completely alone in my pain, abandoned by the very people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. The weeks following the wedding invitation revelation were among the darkest I've experienced. I cycled through emotions like a washing machine on a heavy-duty cycle. Rage, sadness, vindictiveness, and crushing inadequacy, round and round without pause. I stopped answering family calls. I called in sick to work for 3 days straight, something I'd never done before. I turned down plans with friends, preferring to sit alone in my apartment, alternating between crying and staring blankly at Netflix shows I wasn't really watching. At night, sleep eluded me. I'd lie awake replaying my mother's words, "Your appearance would ruin her day." How could the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally be so conditional in their acceptance? Was I really so embarrassing that my presence would ruin a wedding? A week after discovering I wasn't invited, I found myself doing something I'd promised myself I wouldn't do: drinking alone. One glass of wine turned into the entire bottle as I scrolled through old photos of Mackenzie and me. There we were building sandcastles at age 8. Opening Christmas presents at 12, attending my high school art show where she had come to support me despite our growing differences. Where had that Mackenzie gone? In my wine-induced haze, I started crafting scenarios where I could make them regret excluding me. Maybe I could show up anyway, cause a scene, expose their superficially to all the high society guests they were so concerned about impressing. Maybe I could post publicly about being excluded from my appearance, letting their precious social circle see how shallow they really were. These vindictive fantasies never materialized into action, but they consumed my thoughts for days. The worst part was beneath the anger I still desperately wanted their approval, and that realization made me hate myself even more. I missed a deadline at work for the first time in my career. My boss, concerned about my uncharacteristic behavior, called me into her office. "Is everything okay, Haley? This isn't like you." I broke down in tears right there, the professional demeanor I'd maintained crumbling completely. Between sobs I explained the situation. My boss, a woman with a sleeve of tattoos herself, listened with empathy. "Take the rest of the day," she said kindly. "But Haley, don't let them convince you that there's something wrong with you. The problem is with them, not you." I appreciated her words, but they couldn't reach the wounded place inside me that still believed maybe, just maybe, if I were different, more normal, more conventional, more like Mackenzie, I would be worthy of inclusion. The wedding was now just 3 weeks away, and I found myself obsessively checking social media for updates. I saw posts about Mackenzie's bachelor weekend in wine country, a trip I would have been part of in a different reality. I saw my aunt posting about final dress fittings and floral arrangements. Each post was like salt in the wound. I reached my lowest point about 2 weeks before the wedding. I was sitting on my bathroom floor at 2 a.m., scissors in hand, seriously contemplating cutting off my purple hair and dyeing it a natural color. Maybe if I looked normal enough, they would change their minds. Maybe if I erased the visible signs of my individuality, I would finally be acceptable to my family. The realization of what I was considering hit me like a bucket of cold water. I was ready to erase myself, to conform, just to be included by people who couldn't accept me for who I was. I put down the scissors and sobbed until my throat was raw. During this time, I received awkward messages from extended family members who had heard about the situation. Most were uncomfortable acknowledgments that did nothing to help. "Such a shame you can't make it to the wedding. We'll miss you," as if it had been my choice not to attend. I'm sure Mackenzie wanted to invite everyone, but venue space is so limited these days. A transparent lie when my second cousin twice removed and his new girlfriend had been invited. Maybe it's for the best. These formal events can be so boring anyway, missing the point entirely. Even Ryan, Mackenzie's brother, who had always been friendly to me, sent only a brief text. "This sucks." I told them they were being ridiculous, but he didn't stand up for me enough to make a difference, and he was still attending the wedding. As the wedding date drew nearer, my emotional state deteriorated further. I began having anxiety attacks, something I hadn't experienced since college. I couldn't focus on design projects that had once brought me joy. I stopped painting entirely. The creative well had run dry, replaced by a toxic mix of self-doubt and resentment. I started questioning everything about myself. Was my self-expression worth the cost of family connection? Was I being selfish by refusing to conform for just one day? Was there something fundamentally wrong with me that made me unworthy of inclusion? The rational part of my brain knew these thoughts were distortions born from rejection, but the wounded part couldn't distinguish truth from pain. I was drowning in self-doubt with no life raft in sight. A week before the wedding, at my lowest point, I found myself in my weekly session with Dr. Rachel, the therapist I'd been seeing on and off for the past few years. I hadn't planned to discuss the wedding situation. I'd been avoiding it in our recent sessions, focusing instead on work stress and other surface-level concerns. But when she asked her usual opening question, "How have you been since our last session?" something in me broke open. "My entire family is attending my cousin's wedding this weekend except me," I blurted out. "I wasn't invited because they think I'll ruin their perfect photos with my appearance." Dr. Rachel's expression remained calm, but I could see the concern in her eyes as I poured out the whole story: the exclusion, my mother's cruel words, the family's tacit approval of my rejection, and my spiral into self-doubt and depression. When I finally ran out of words, she was quiet for a moment, considering her response. "Haley, I want to ask you something. If a friend came to you with this exact situation, if they told you their family had excluded them from an important event because of their appearance, what would you tell them?" I thought about it. I'd tell them their family was being shallow and cruel, and that there was nothing wrong with them. "So why are you not extending that same compassion to yourself?" Her question hit me like a thunderbolt. She was right. If Brooke or any of my friends had been treated this way, I would be outraged on their behalf. I would never suggest they change themselves to accommodate such superficial judgment. Yet here I was, contemplating cutting off my hair and erasing my identity to please people who couldn't accept me as I am. "This exclusion," Dr. Rachel continued gently, "says nothing about your worth and everything about their limitations. The question isn't why they can't accept you, it's why you're still seeking acceptance from people who have repeatedly shown they value appearances over authenticity." We spent the rest of the session exploring this insight. Dr. Rachel helped me see that I had been giving my family power over my self-worth for years, measuring myself against their narrow standards and inevitably coming up short. The wedding exclusion wasn't the problem. It was merely a symptom of a deeper family dynamic that had been hurting me for most of my life. "What would it look like," she asked toward the end of our session, "to take back your power in this situation?" I considered her question carefully. I guess it would mean not letting their rejection define me, not changing myself to fit their mold, maybe even creating my own celebration instead of mourning my exclusion from theirs. She nodded encouragingly. "That sounds like a much healthier approach than what you've been doing." I left that session feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks, a glimmer of hope, a small light in the darkness of rejection. That night, instead of drinking wine alone and scrolling through social media, I called Brooke. "I need your help," I told her. "I want to reclaim the wedding day. I want to do something that honors who I am instead of mourning who they want me to be." Brooke, always my most enthusiastic supporter, didn't miss a beat. "Hell yes, we'll have our own celebration. An anti-wedding, a thank God you're not at that stuffy country club party. We stayed up late brainstorming ideas for the day. Brooke suggested a hike to my favorite overlook spot, followed by a picnic with close friends who accepted and celebrated me exactly as I was. We could even do a little ceremony, she suggested, something symbolic to release all the negative energy the situation has created. For the first time in weeks, I felt excitement bubbling up inside me. This was something I could control. This was a way to transform pain into joy, rejection into self-celebration. The next day, I did something that surprised even me. I bought a beautiful handmade card and wrote a sincere note to Mackenzie. Dear Mac, I wanted to wish you and James all the happiness in the world as you begin your life together. While I'm saddened not to be there to celebrate with you, I understand it's your day and respect your decision. I'm sending a small contribution toward your honeymoon fund as a token of my love for you. Despite our differences, the bond we shared growing up will always be a precious part of my life. With love, Haley. I enclosed a generous check, more than I could really afford, but I wanted to take the high road. I didn't send this gift to make her feel guilty or to win approval. I sent it because despite everything, I did love her and wanted her to be happy, and more importantly, I wanted to behave according to my own values, not react from a place of hurt. After mailing the card, I deleted the Instagram and Facebook apps from my phone. I knew seeing the wedding photos would only reopen wounds that were just beginning to heal. This wasn't about avoiding reality, it was about protecting my peace during a vulnerable time. That evening, I sat down and wrote a letter to my mother, a letter I wasn't sure I'd ever send but needed to write. In it, I expressed the pain her words had caused me, not just about the wedding but throughout my life. I wrote about my need for boundaries going forward, and my decision to no longer seek approval that came with conditions. It was the most honest I'd ever been about my feelings toward her, and writing it was both terrifying and liberating. As the wedding day approached, instead of dread, I began to feel a strange sense of calm. For the first time, I was choosing how to respond to my family's rejection rather than simply reacting to it. I was creating something positive out of something painful, and in doing so I was reclaiming my power. The morning of Mackenzie's wedding dawned bright and clear, one of those perfect June days that wedding planners dream about. As I opened my eyes, I felt the expected pang of sadness, the echo of rejection that had become my constant companion over the past weeks. But alongside it was something new, a quiet determination to make this day meaningful in my own way. I'd planned my self-celebration day carefully with Brooke's help. By 9 a.m. she was at my door with coffee and pastries, her car already packed with hiking gear, picnic supplies, and even a small portable speaker. Ready for operation, living my best life while others make bad decisions, she asked with a grin as she handed me a latte. I couldn't help but laugh. That's quite a mouthful for an operation name. We can workshop it, she replied, but the sentiment stands. Today is about you reclaiming joy. We drove out of the city toward the mountains, windows down, singing along to an empowerment playlist Brooke had curated specifically for the occasion. With each mile that passed, I felt the weight on my shoulders lightening slightly. By 10:30 am, we had reached the trailhead for my favorite hike, a moderately challenging path that led to a stunning overlook of alpine lakes and distant peaks. Two other friends, Maya and Zach, were waiting for us there, both giving me warm hugs as we gathered our gear. We've got your back today, Maya said simply, squeezing my hand. They both knew about the wedding situation and had immediately agreed to be part of my alternative celebration. The hike was exactly what I needed, physically demanding enough to keep my mind focused on the present moment rather than spiraling into thoughts of what was happening at the country club where Mackenzie's ceremony would be starting soon. We talked, we laughed. We paused to identify wildflowers and take photos of particularly beautiful vistas. Not once did anyone mention the wedding directly, though they all made subtle supportive comments throughout the journey. When we reached the overlook around noon, I was breathless both from the climb and from the sheer beauty spread out before us. The view had always been healing for me, the vastness of nature putting human problems into perspective. We found a flat, grassy area and spread out the picnic blankets Brooke had packed. Before we eat, Brooke announced, pulling a small bundle from her backpack, Haley and I planned a little ritual. She handed me a stack of small pieces of paper and a pen. Write down the thoughts and feelings you want to release, she instructed, one per paper, then we'll burn them. I sat cross-legged on the blanket and began to write. I am not defined by my family's approval. My worth is not determined by others' acceptance. I release the need to be included by those who cannot appreciate me fully. I am enough exactly as I am. One by one, I read each statement aloud before carefully setting it alight with the lighter Brooke had brought. watching as the flames consumed the painful thoughts and transformed them into ash and smoke that drifted away on the mountain breeze. My friends added their own papers to the ritual, affirmations of my value and statements of support that brought tears to my eyes. When the ritual was complete, we unpacked our feast, a spread of my favorite foods that Brooke had thoughtfully assembled. There was artisanal cheese, fresh bread, summer berries, chocolate, and even a small bottle of champagne. A toast, Maya said, raising her plastic cup of bubbles, to Haley, who has more authenticity and courage in her little finger than most people have in their entire bodies. To Haley, Zach and Brooke echoed, clinking their cups against mine. As we ate and talked, I felt a sense of genuine joy bubbling up inside me, not the forced happiness I had feared I might need to manufacture to get through the day, but real pleasure in the company of people who truly saw and accepted me. We were finishing our meal when I heard someone calling my name from the trail. Looking up, I was shocked to see my cousin Ryan approaching, slightly out of breath and still wearing dress pants, though he'd ditched the jacket and tie. "Ryan," I stood up, confusion washing over me. "What are you doing here? Aren't you supposed to be at the wedding?" He shrugged, a sheepish smile on his face. "I decided I'd rather be where family is actually being supported." He looked at my friends. "Hope you don't mind me crashing your party. I couldn't sit through that ceremony knowing you were excluded for such shallow reasons." I was speechless, tears filling my eyes as Ryan approached and gave me a tight hug. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "a lot of people there noticed your absence and were asking questions. Grandma Ruth in particular was not happy when she found out why you weren't invited. She told Aunt Meredith it was the most ridiculous thing she'd ever heard, and that she was ashamed of how you've been treated." This revelation that not everyone in my family approved of my exclusion was both comforting and vindicating. I introduced Ryan to my friends, and he joined our circle, fitting in easily with his natural charm and genuine interest in getting to know the people who were important to me. As the afternoon progressed, Brooke pulled out her camera. She's a talented photographer and suggested taking some portraits of me against the spectacular mountain backdrop. "The light is perfect," she insisted, "and you look absolutely radiant today." I agreed, and what followed was a spontaneous photo shoot that became one of my favorite memories of the day. Unlike the stiff-posed wedding photos happening across town, these were joyful, authentic captures of me being completely myself, purple hair, tattoos, hiking boots and all. In some photos I was laughing with my friends, in others contemplative against the panoramic vista. Brooke kept showing me the results on her camera display, and I was struck by how genuinely happy I looked, how much more me these images were than any formal wedding photo could have been. By late afternoon we hiked back down the trail, pleasantly tired and sun-warmed. Ryan had received multiple texts from his parents demanding to know where he was, but he simply responded that he was with family and turned off his phone. His quiet act of solidarity meant more to me than I could express. Instead of going straight home, we decided to extend our celebration. We drove to a nearby lake where we built a bonfire as the sun began to set, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories well into the evening, under the emerging stars, surrounded by friends and one brave family ally. I realized I had created something beautiful and meaningful from what could have been a day of isolation and pain. As Ryan prepared to leave, he was driving back to the city that night. He pulled me aside. "Haley, I want you to know something. What they did, excluding you, it wasn't right, and not everyone agrees with it. This perfect image they're trying to maintain isn't real, and it's not worth the hurt they've caused." His words were a balm to the lingering wound of rejection. "Thank you for coming today," I said, giving him a final hug. "It means more than you know." As I watched him drive away, I felt a strange sense of peace. The wedding day that had loomed so ominously in my mind had been transformed into something unexpected, a day of authentic connection, natural beauty, and personal victory. I hadn't needed to change myself to find belonging. I had created it on my own terms, with people who valued me exactly as I was. The days following the wedding were surprisingly peaceful. Instead of obsessively checking social media for wedding photos or falling into a depression about what I'd missed, I found myself reflecting on the beautiful day I'd created with my friends. Brooke had sent me the photos from our mountain adventure, and I printed my favorites to hang in my apartment, tangible reminders of choosing authenticity over approval. A week after the wedding, I decided it was time to deliver the letter I'd written to my mother. Rather than mailing it, I asked her to meet me at a neutral location, a quiet cafe halfway between our homes. She agreed, perhaps curious about my lack of communication since our devastating phone call weeks earlier. When she arrived, I noticed she looked tired, the strain of maintaining appearances perhaps taking its toll. We ordered coffee, exchanged awkward pleasantries about the weather, and then I placed the envelope on the table between us. "I've written down what I need to say," I explained, "because I want to be clear and not get derailed by emotions. I'd like you to read it now while I'm here." She looked apprehensive but opened the envelope and began to read. I watched her face as she absorbed my words, my hurt over being excluded from the wedding, but more importantly, the deeper pain of never feeling accepted for who I truly am. I had written about specific moments throughout my life where her criticism and conditional love had damaged our relationship and my self-esteem. I concluded by expressing my need for boundaries going forward, that I would no longer participate in family gatherings where I was expected to be someone other than myself. When she finished reading, she carefully folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. Her face was composed, but I could see the slight tremble in her hands. "I never meant to hurt you," she said finally. "I've always wanted what's best for you." "I know that's what you believe," I replied. "But Mom, you've confused what's best for me with what would make me most acceptable to others. They're not the same thing." We talked for nearly 2 hours, the most honest conversation we'd ever had. She didn't fully understand my perspective, and I didn't expect her to suddenly change her values, but there was a new recognition between us, an acknowledgement that our relationship needed to change if it was to survive at all. As we parted, she surprised me by saying, "Your hair actually doesn't look bad with your complexion." It wasn't quite an apology or acceptance, but from my mother, it was a small step that meant something. 3 weeks after the wedding, I received an unexpected call from Mackenzie. She and James had returned from their honeymoon in the Maldives, and she wanted to meet for coffee. I agreed, curious about what she wanted to say. We met at a small cafe near my apartment. Her coming to my neighborhood rather than expecting me to drive to the suburbs was a small but significant gesture. When she walked in, I was struck by how formal she still looked, even in what was clearly her version of casual attire, designer jeans, a silk blouse, and perfectly styled hair. "Thank you for meeting me," she said as she sat down, "and thank you for the wedding gift. It was unexpected." "I still care about you, Mac," I said simply, "despite everything." She looked down at her coffee cup. "Grandma Ruth really let Mom and Aunt Meredith have it after the wedding. She said excluding you was cruel and shallow." A small smile crossed her face. "She's always been the only one who could put them in their place." I waited, allowing her the space to continue. "I'm sorry, Haley," she finally said. "I got caught up in creating this perfect day, this perfect image, and I lost sight of what really matters. Ryan showed me the photos from your mountain trip. You look so happy, happier than I felt on my perfect day, if I'm being honest." Her admission opened the door to a real conversation about our relationship, the family dynamics that had driven us apart, and whether reconciliation was possible. I didn't make it easy for her. I needed her to understand the depth of the hurt her exclusion had caused. But I also listened to her perspective, how she'd felt trapped between her desires and the expectations of our mothers, James's family, and the social circle she'd worked so hard to be accepted by. "I don't know if I can ever be the person our family wants me to be," I told her honestly, "and I've reached a point where I don't want to try anymore." "Maybe that's not a bad thing," she replied thoughtfully. "Sometimes I wonder who I'd be if I hadn't tried so hard to fit their mold." It wasn't a complete resolution, but it was a beginning. We agreed to try rebuilding our relationship on new terms with more honesty and fewer expectations. In the months that followed, I made significant changes in my life. I limited contact with my mother and Aunt Diane, engaging only when I felt emotionally strong enough to maintain my boundaries. I declined the annual family Thanksgiving gathering, choosing instead to host a Friendsgiving with the people who accepted me unconditionally. My relationship with my father improved somewhat after I directly confronted him about his unwillingness to stand up for me. He admitted his conflict avoidance had hurt me, and while he didn't transform overnight into a staunch defender, he made more effort to support me in his own way. Professionally, I channeled the emotional intensity of the wedding exclusion into my creative work. I developed a series of designs exploring themes of authenticity, belonging, and chosen family that attracted attention in the Seattle art community. This led to new client opportunities and eventually a promotion at my design agency. I also found a sense of community through an art collective in my neighborhood, creative, authentic people who valued expression over conformity. Through this group, I developed friendships that felt more like family than many of my blood relations ever had. Perhaps most surprisingly, my relationship with Mackenzie began to heal, though in a different form than our childhood closeness. She started visiting me in Seattle more frequently, sometimes even without James, and I noticed small changes in her, the loosening of her perfectly maintained appearance. More genuine laughter, more honest conversation. She confided that the perfect life she'd constructed didn't bring her the happiness she'd expected, and she was questioning many of the values our family had instilled in her. 6 months after the wedding, I received a small package from my mother. Inside was a framed photo of Mackenzie and me as children, building a sandcastle at our grandparents' lake house, along with a brief note. I was organizing old photos and found this. You were always so creative, Mom. It wasn't a full acceptance or apology I might have wished for, but it was an acknowledgement of sorts, a recognition of who I had always been, even before I had the courage to fully express it. The wedding exclusion that had once felt like the ultimate rejection had become, ironically, the catalyst for greater authenticity in my life. By forcing me to confront the conditional nature of my family's acceptance, it had freed me to stop seeking their approval and start building a life based on my own values. I still have moments of sadness about the family relationships I wish I had, but these are balanced by gratitude for the chosen family I've created, people who celebrate rather than merely tolerate the person I truly am. I've learned that belonging doesn't have to come at the cost of authenticity, and that the approval most worth having is from those who see and value our whole, unfiltered selves. If you're watching this and you've ever felt like the black sheep, the misfit, the one who doesn't quite belong in your family, please know that you're not alone. There are people out there who will celebrate exactly who you are. Sometimes the family we create is more nurturing than the one we're born into. And that's okay. Your worth isn't determined by those who can accept you fully. It's defined by your courage to live authentically in a world that often rewards conformity. I'd love to hear your stories of family acceptance or rejection in the comments below. Have you ever been excluded from a family event? How did you handle it? If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more authentic conversations about family dynamics, self-acceptance, and personal growth. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, you are enough, exactly as you are.